This is wrestling's greatest moments.
Hey now, wrestling fans, it's time for another episode of Wrestling's Greatest Moments. Are some wrestling pay-per-views cursed? You may be skeptical, but not after you watch our next video about one of WCW's biggest duds. Sit back as Wrestling's Greatest Moments looks at the horror of Halloween Havoc. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single video. Pro wrestling fans have witnessed some pathetic pay-per-view shows such as WCW Uncensored, the WWE's December to Dismember, and the indie debacle Heroes of Wrestling all come to mind. As we saw in our video, The Loathsome Legacy of Uncensored, some shows seem to attract awfulness. One such event was WCW's Halloween Havoc pay-per-view. The show debuted in 1989, and as we'll soon see, featured a horrifying host of mediocre matches, bad booking, and overall awfulness. Halloween Havoc 1989. WCW was in a good place in terms of its wrestling roster and its booking. Ric Flair's feud with Terry Funk was going strong, as was Sting's feud with the Great Muta. This led to a main event cage match with Flair and Sting battling Funk and Muta. It even had the added attraction of the living legend Bruno Sammartino serving as special referee. Regrettably, the match was billed as a Thunderdome match. The Thunderdome match featured an electrified roof to keep wrestlers from climbing out, and the only way the match could be won was when a team's representative threw in the towel. The cage not only kept wrestlers from escaping, it also managed to set one of the show's decorations on fire. Thankfully, the Great Muta used his green mist to extinguish it, proving the versatility of his mysterious mist. The match ended anticlimactically as the babyface's representative slugged the heel's representative Gary Hart, causing Hart to accidentally throw in the towel for his team. Halloween Havoc 1990. In 1990, Ole Anderson was adamant about proving that he was bereft of any booking ability. Consider the case of 1990's main event, NWA World Champion Sting defending his belt against monster heel Sid Vicious. In this case, Sid decided to show that there were some brains to back up his brawn, and he pulled a switcheroo on the Stinger as noted in the book Wrestlecrap. The bout was like any other championship match until Sid lured Sting away from the ring and down the entrance aisle. After vanishing from the fans' view, Sid came staggering back to the ring with Sting in tow. For some reason, however, Sting was suddenly 7 inches taller and at least 50 pounds fatter. Sting collapsed to the mat, with Sid covering him for the 1-2-3 and the title win. Was this a forerunner of the match where Hulk Hogan laid down for Sting, giving him an easy win? No. Fans quickly saw another Sting show up, this one bearing a remarkable resemblance to the man called Sting. Sting attacked Sid, and a light bulb went off over the referee's head as he realized he'd been bamboozled. The fake Sting was none other than the heel wrestler Barry Windham, who might have gotten away with things if it wasn't for those meddling kids and the fact that he was significantly taller and heavier than Sting. Halloween Havoc 1991. In the interest of full disclosure, 1991's Havoc was a strong show that featured some excellent wrestling, including a 2 out of 3 falls match between WCW World Champion Lex Luger and Ron Simmons, a WCW Light Cruiserweight Championship match between Brian Pillman and Richard Morton, and a TV title match between stunning Steve Austin and Dustin Rhodes. The rest of the show was hit and miss. Fans might have excused duds like Bill Kazmaier versus Oz and Van Hammer versus Doug Summers. The problem was the elephant in the room, or in this case, the electric chair in the Chamber of Horrors match. The 8-man tag match was held in a steel cage. This was not a normal steel cage, as there was a smaller cage waiting to be lowered down into the larger cage. The cage within a cage contained an electric chair. Had WCW devised a new way to get rid of wrestlers without FedExing them their releases? No. The goal here was to trap a member of the opposite team in the chair and electrocute them. Here, El Gigante, the Steiner brothers, and Sting battled Abdullah the Butcher, the Diamond Stud, Cactus Jack, and Big Van Vader, in a bout with mortal stakes. The match had various lowlights, including Cactus Jack nearly being crushed by the mini-cage when it descended into the main cage. Things went sideways when Abdullah the Butcher was placed in the chair, only for his own teammate to throw the switch, zapping him into oblivion, but not the great beyond. Wrestling fans have heard of death matches, but nothing this off the wall. Halloween Havoc 1992. Spin the wheel, make the deal. That's all that's necessary for fans to remember a magnificent main event that quickly went south. Jake the Snake Roberts' entry into WCW created a plethora of possibilities for some terrific matches, one of them being the heel Roberts taking on an archetypal babyface Sting. The match even had an interesting concept, a Wheel of Fortune with various match types including dog collar matches, cage matches, and I Quit matches would be spun to determine the match stipulation. Unfortunately, the wheel landed on Coal Miner's Glove match, a match where two wrestlers attempt to retrieve a loaded glove from a pole. Wrestling legend has it that the wheel wasn't rigged, which naturally would have led to a better match. Whatever the case, this bout had all the suspense of watching the Harlem Globetrotters playing the Washington Generals. The match saw Sting retrieve the glove, KO Roberts, and win the match. However, when Roberts tried to stick his Cobra on Sting, the Snake was supposed to turn on Jake, and the hapless wrestler's attempt to simulate this led to a hilarious post-match moment that symbolized everything wrong about this. Halloween Havoc 1993. On the surface, 1993's Halloween Havoc was a strong card, but as horror fans know, evil is always lurking nearby. The opening bout featured Ice Train, PN News, and the Shockmaster battling Harlem Heat and the Equalizer. No, not the film or TV versions. Not since Mo, Curly, and Larry formed a trio has there been a bunch of bumbling idiots as bad as this babyface team. And in the case of the Three Stooges, they were only acting when they played bumbling idiots. Halloween Havoc 1994. Be fair to Flair. When Hulk Hogan entered WCW, WCW fans didn't know what to expect. Hogan was everything that fans of traditional Southern wrestling disliked. A larger-than-life muscle man who showed little technical wrestling and worked short matches. Would Hogan change his style as he did when he wrestled in Japan, expanding on his repertoire? Of course not. Hogan's lucrative deal with WCW gave him easy money and creative control, which meant happy days for the Hulkster. Although WCW wisely capitalized on a Hogan vs. Flair feud, a program which somehow the WWF failed to exploit when Flair was in the WWF, Flair's days in WCW were fading fast. Hogan steamrolled over Flair in their first match, capturing the WCW World Championship. A rematch ended with Flair winning by countout, but that was just the setup for a steel cage retirement match at Halloween Havoc, complete with Mr. T serving as special referee. Flair lost, and so did the fans, as Havoc was full of Hogan's pals, who had jumped to WCW with dollar signs in their eyes. Wrestlers such as Honky Tonk Man, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and the Guardian Angel, aka the WWF's Big Boss Man, soiled the undercard. Halloween Havoc 1995. Hogan and the Giant. 1995 was a fantastic year for the authors of the books Wrestlecrap and Titan Sinking, because it provided them with endless material to joke about and criticize. Case in point, the sumo monster truck match between Hulk Hogan and the Giant, who WCW shamelessly hinted at being Andre the Giant's son, that saw the Giant try to throw Hogan off the top of the historic Joe Louis Arena. Instead, the Giant fell to his certain demise, which gave Hulk Hogan the night off from having to defend his WCW World Championship. Incredibly, the Giant showed up for the match without a scratch. The match ended when Hogan was disqualified after his manager, Jimmy Hart, clobbered the referee, then the Hulkster. This Benedict Arnold-level betrayal, at least in the eyes of Hulk Hogan, led to the Giant winning the title, thanks to a double secret clause Hart had put in Hogan's contract that he could lose via disqualification. Just to add to the awfulness, the Dungeon of Doom's resident mummy, the Yeti, showed up, joining the Giant in smothering Hogan in a double bear hug. Halloween Havoc 1996. 1996 was a year in which WCW seemed to be incapable of doing anything wrong once it launched the New World Order storyline. There were hiccups here and there, but 1996 Halloween Havoc made fans think the worst was behind them. Could WCW finally have turned the corner? It seemed that way as the NWO juggernaut picked up steam week by week. Halloween Havoc 1997. 1997 wasn't a bad year for Havoc, but it showed signs that disaster could happen at any time. Alex Wright defeating Steve McMichael and Jacqueline wrestling Disco Inferno were two signs that the awfulness was only lying dormant. The Hulk Hogan vs. Roddy Piper steel cage match, dubbed Age in a Cage, wasn't the stuff of legend, but it seemed to prove Eric Bischoff's idea that WCW could thrive on Jurassic-era main eventers' popularity while providing solid undercard wrestling. Still, 1997's Havoc was the equivalent of the post-credit scene where everyone believes the monster has been vanquished, only for it to raise its hand from the grave. Halloween Havoc, 1998. It's the rematch that made wrestling history. Unfortunately, history as in the wrestling equivalent of a date which will live in infamy. Here, the Ultimate Warrior working as the Warrior, and Hulk Hogan tried to capture lightning in a bottle again. To many fans' surprise, the Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan's match at WrestleMania 6 was more than watchable, it was surprisingly good. The reason wasn't the wrestlers involved, as much as it was the man who put their match together. Pat Patterson, the talented wrestler and producer, created a match that played to both superstars' strengths and avoided their many limitations in the ring, creating a 24-minute epic. However, the Warrior and Hogan didn't have the benefit of Pat Patterson here, and it showed. The 14-minute match was like watching two middle-aged men with bad backs and knees duking it out in an Applebee's parking lot after too many $1 Long Island iced teas. Wrestling lore has it that Hogan asked for the match so he could get his win back after losing to the Warrior at WrestleMania 6. The Warrior lost, as did everyone who watched. WCW lost too, thanks to its decision to have the pay-per-view run 3.5 hours instead of the traditional 3. That shouldn't have been a problem, but as the authors of The Death of WCW point out, to make matters significantly worse, nobody bothered to tell the cable companies, because at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 25% of the folks who had purchased the show suddenly found themselves looking at a blank screen. Local outlets were flooded with angry phone calls and had to struggle to come up with some sort of offer to placate the fans, most of which demanded full refund. When all was said and done, it's estimated that WCW lost almost $1.5 million in pay-per-view revenue. Because of this simple miscommunication, there have been many theories for the death of WCW: overspending, bad booking, mismanagement, and a failure to create new stars. Anyone looking for evidence to prove their theory need look no further than Halloween Havoc. Halloween Havoc 1999. As bad as 1998's Halloween Havoc Warrior vs. Hogan match was, at least the two titans tried to wrestle. In 1999, Hogan was scheduled to defend the WCW Championship against Sting. Instead, Hogan laid down in the middle of the ring and let Sting pin him. With Sting becoming WCW champion, this wasn't that much of a surprise for WCW fans who had witnessed the finger poke of doom between Hogan and Kevin Nash, but WCW reached new lows that night. The Stinger issued an open challenge for anyone to face him in a non-title match. Bill Goldberg answered the call, promptly pinning Sting. Astonishingly, the referee awarded the title to Dollar Bill. Sting took out his frustrations on the referee, but the fans went home happy. That is until the next night, when WCW decreed that Sting had vacated the WCW title when he attacked the referee. This description has you reaching for the Excedrin. You're not alone. Halloween Havoc 2000. We've all heard the saying, all good things come to an end. But what about bad things? By the time Halloween Havoc 2000 rolled around, WCW was on life support. Despite still having a strong undercard roster, WCW had the same problem in 2000 as it had during the early 90s. It tried to emulate the WWF, but it couldn't read what worked and what didn't. In 2000, WCW thought it could copy the success of the edgy Attitude Era, but it was like a 5-year-old trying to copy a Rembrandt. A good example was the First Blood DNA match, where David Flair attempted to get a blood sample from Buff Bagwell in order to determine whether Bagwell was the father of Flair's storyline girlfriend, Stacy Keibler. The storyline saw Flair trying to determine if Keibler was catting around. Instead of a DNA test, WCW should have ordered an IQ test for its creative department. What do you think about Halloween Havoc? Did WCW anger the wrestling gods by daring to air a pay-per-view oriented around Halloween? Or was this just a case of WCW being WCW?
Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let us know if there are any videos you'd like wrestling's greatest moments to cover. In the meantime, subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Wrestling's greatest moments. The channel that celebrates the squared circle.